What's going on, everyone? Let's talk Prop 21, which, by the way, vote no. No on Prop 21. Why are we voting no? Well, let's get into it. The summary of the prop is it allows local governments to establish rent control on residential properties over 15 years old. Local limits on rate increases may differ from statewide limit. Fiscal impact overall, a potential reduction in state and local revenues in the highs tens of millions of dollars per year over time. Depending on actions by local communities, revenue losses could be less or more. So a no on this vote means state laws would maintain current limits on rent control laws. Cities and counties can apply. So, and if you vote yes, then a state would allow cities and counties to apply more kinds of rent control to more properties under current law. The way they kind of frame this, it expands local government's authority to enact rent control on residential property. So it makes it sound like the state is going to lower rent control, because right now it seems like, well, obviously because in California, rent is very high. It's hard to live anywhere in like Los Angeles, San Francisco, extremely expensive. In San Bernardino, it's not that bad compared to LA or SF, but it still could be more affordable. And don't get me wrong, it's better, but it's just hard to live here when rent goes up every year. And the reason rent goes up every year is because people vote yes on some other tax. Every time we have an election cycle, they're introducing more taxes to fund more things that are like, it's supposed to be for school, for the roads, for just all the infrastructure things that we need as a state. But what they do to pay for those things, even though they don't really pay for them, all they do is increase the taxes, and they kind of barely maintain the existing infrastructure. But what they do is they raise the rent, they raise income tax, they raise sales tax, they raise every kind of tax that we have, so that they can pay for these new roads, these new school programs, these new this, new that. But they don't actually enact and give us new things. They just kind of maintain it enough so people don't really catch on, that like, hey, they're just taking advantage of us and increasing taxes and taking more money away from us, out of our paychecks, out of our sales, out of everything. So no on 21, because all they're going to do is raise your rent. Not even raise your rent, because we're going to raise the property tax. What will probably happen if this passes is that state and local governments will have control over telling people how much they're allowed to rent out their properties to. If you're renting out property, like if you own a house, the state and local government can tell you how much you're allowed to rent the house out for. And here's the real problem, though. Like, our rent control could be maintained. It could be a lot cheaper to live here if we eliminated things, or lowered, because I don't think we'll ever eliminate property tax. But if we lowered property tax instead of increased property tax, people wouldn't have to charge as much for renting out their homes to people who need to rent out homes. Because people who are renting out homes probably don't know, because they don't own a house, that the owners of the properties have to pay property tax. And if the property tax goes up every year, then you have to raise how much rent you charge to your tenants, because you need to be able to afford to pay the property tax. So it's a never-ending cycle of the state increasing the property tax for the property owner. So then the property owner has to increase the rent on the people who are renting out their property. So if we did the opposite and we lowered property tax, then renters could then lower the rent for the tenants, because it's like, okay, well, now, like, I don't have to pay as much of property tax. And yeah, so we need the reverse of this bill. And the tricky thing about that is introducing that into legislation for the California, because we're a one-party state. California is basically a Democratic state. It's run by Democrats, and Democrats love taxes. They love to raise taxes and raise taxes on you, and because that's basically how they make their money. So what we need to do is figure out how, as a community, as a state, even just the communities throughout the state, figure out ways to introduce legislation that lowers property tax on everything: homes, businesses, income. And if we can do that, then it would be a lot less stressful on us, because we wouldn't have to be worrying about paying for these politicians' paychecks, and these politicians, they don't do anything for us in return anyways. Anyways, no on Proposition 21. I don't know how else other to explain it other than what I just said. So yeah, no on 21. See you in the next video.